We have an amazing panel here from Morgan Stanley with us today, who will be discussing their career journeys and professional experiences as Black and ethnically diverse professionals, sharing insights into how they made changes to their careers and tips on how you can apply similar methods if you are considering a career pivot. I'm Meghan Bethel, and I will be moderating the discussion today. I'm a vice president within the investment management business, which is the asset management arm of Morgan Stanley. And I work in a team that is responsible for oversight of our portfolio management and trading activity. I've been with the firm for about 8.5 years now and have worked in the firm's New York, London, and now Dublin offices within both the internal audit and now investment management divisions. For me, this topic is really important because, while I haven't changed industries in my career, I have changed departments before, and I know how daunting even that experience can be. You're running through all the risks in your head, wondering if you're equipped for the role, questioning whether your current manager or team will be supportive. And I think one of the best things you can do is to start talking out loud about it, about your aspirations, what you envision your next step to be, and then developing a framework or roadmap to get there. And so I hope that this discussion really helps you in developing that roadmap and provides you with tangible steps that you can take that will really set you up for success. So in terms of the agenda for today's discussion, we'll start with an introduction from all of our panelists, and then we'll have a discussion of a few questions that I have prepared for them, and then we'll go into Q&A. So before we kick off, I'll just note that everyone is on mute, but you can submit questions through the chat functionality on the Zoom screen, and we will aim to answer as many of your questions as possible in today's conversation. So let's get started, and we'll introduce you to our amazing panelists. They represent different business units from across the firm, and they all bring unique experiences and perspectives, which will make for a really valuable discussion. They have all made a change within their career, whether that's a change in industry, company, or department, and they'll share with you their stories and how you can strategize for success and really authentically elevate your career. So perhaps I'll start one by one. Perhaps Lawrence, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself first.
Yeah, sure, and thank you. And good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, my name is Lawrence Hemming. I'm a vice president in our diversity and inclusion team here in the EMEA region. I've been at Morgan Stanley for about 7-8 months now, so hopefully that still counts as somewhat new, but yeah, definitely enjoying my time here so far. So my role at Morgan Stanley is threefold. So one part is I'm a D&I advisor to our technology, operations, and company divisions. Secondly, I look after a lot of our networks from a strategic perspective, with the oversight piece of a lot of what they're doing throughout the year. And then lastly, I look at a lot of the marketing communications from a D&I perspective, so how we're telling the story at Morgan Stanley in the EMEA region, and the channels that we're using to do that. Kind of my story up until Morgan Stanley super quickly. So I started off in a professional services firm in finance admin role, pivoted then to client-facing insurance insolvencies, then went to corporate marketing at a bank, back to professional services, corporate marketing again, and now I'm in diversity and inclusion. So today's discussions really resonates with me because I've kind of really pivoted at multiple stages in my career. So you're really looking forward to having a conversation with my colleagues today.
Great, thank you, Lawrence. Elizabeth, can we go to you next?
Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Elizabeth Harris. I'm a vice president here in the fixed income division. Specifically, I'm in public finance banking here at Morgan Stanley. Yesterday marked my 2nd anniversary with the firm. I am an attorney by profession. I was an attorney for more than 15 years. I started as a young associate at a large firm. I clerked for a judge. I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office where I was a federal prosecutor. And, we'll talk a little bit more about this later on, but I then found myself in-house in a nonprofit that did community development finance work. And that is how I made my way over to Morgan Stanley. I also would be remiss if I didn't say that I am part of the first cohort of the Experienced Professionals program here at Morgan Stanley. And I can talk a bit more about that later. Very happy to be here and to speak with everyone.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And I think we will definitely be hearing more about your experience through the program. Joel, can we go to you next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Joel Aihende. I am part of it's a team called Business Development, which is in the Innovation Division in Technology. I've been with the firm for under 2 years. Prior to that, I was part of Accenture's blockchain and digital asset division. I was there for about 4 years. And prior to that, I was actually working for a reinsurance company as a trainee for some time. And then before that, I was a software engineer. So also did quite a few zigzags in my life. Looking forward to understanding also the panelists' journeys as they progress through their careers, and maybe a little bit about myself as well. I was originally born in Switzerland, Zurich, but my father is from Nigeria. My mom is Swiss. So spent a lot of time as well in Nigeria, kind of looking, which also guided my career trajectory, but a little bit more on that later.
Great, thank you. And Shaqeal.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, just had to get off mute there. So yeah, my name is Shaqeal. I've been at the firm for about 2 years now. I'm an associate in equity research. What that means is that we look at the value of companies on the stock exchange and I guess make assumptions and try to figure out whether we think that's right or not. And based on that, give it a buy, sell, or hold rating. I'm in the autos team. I've been in that team for about a year now. Previously, I was in tech hardware. That's the team I was recruited into. Here we looked at semiconductors and telecoms equipment. Very exciting stuff, but at the moment my focus is on trucks. Also very, very exciting. So previously I worked at a Big Four professional services organization. I was in the transaction advisory team. It was a rotational grad scheme, which basically meant that I saw loads of different areas related to corporate finance, so valuation, business modeling, et cetera, et cetera. I guess the key takeaway from my point of view is that, you know, always try and make sure you go to networking events. I would say that every networking event is actually probably a recruitment opportunity. So go to as many events as you can, because you never know who you're going to run into, who you're going to speak to, and do come prepared as well. Have your story ready, you know your motivations. Yeah, that's it from me.
Great, thank you. Thank you to all of the panelists. So I hope everyone here agrees that this is going to be a really interesting discussion. Before we delve in, I do want to make you aware that applications are currently open for the Morgan Stanley Experienced Professionals Program in London, which Elizabeth alluded to. The program is designed to further attract diverse professionals to the firm with the aim of recruiting and developing experienced professionals from a wide range of industry backgrounds, with or without a background in finance. So as you've already heard, Elizabeth did join us from the US program back in 2021. So if this is something that you are interested in, you'll hear some great insight today, and there'll be more resources available as a follow-up from the team. Okay, so we'll delve into the discussion, and there are some questions that I have prepared, but like we said before, please do submit any questions through the chat, and we'll aim to answer as many of those as we can later. So the first question I have for the panel is, at what point did you decide that you wanted to change your career or industry, and why? And maybe I'll start with Joel for this.
Sure. So as mentioned before, I did a couple of transitions, but I'll focus on the most significant one, which was when I was a software engineer. So I was a software engineer for about 2 years in a small shop in Zurich. I really, enjoyed coding and respected the craft and still do to this day. But I just felt that certain interests and skills that I had weren't really being leveraged. I was more interested in understanding how technology can affect the larger picture and ultimately drive, business value for clients, but also for the user. And then kind of look towards the financial services industry because that always kind of interested me. Specifically, I felt like there were a lot of very complex, demanding challenges that needed to be solved within that space. I was always fascinated with market mechanics, and I also like the fact that in financial services, whatever happens in the real world ultimately also affects the company. So I'm a person who's always trying to keep up to date with what's going on in the world. So I felt like that was something that I did naturally and can then use in my job. And also, as mentioned before, I did a lot of trips to Nigeria, and I kind of saw how lack of financial infrastructure and being unbanked kind of negatively affected the population in such an extreme way. So I was always trying to think of solutions of how this can be addressed with technology and finance. So I really do see myself in the intersection between technology and finance. I think that's a natural fit for me. And I also believe that's something that can be scaled to be more financially inclusive in general.
Great. So it is really a combination of the skill sets that you had in your prior experiences, and then applying that to an area that you thought was interesting to you, that you found appealing, and and here you are today. So that's great. Thank you. Lawrence, would you like to add anything from your experience?
Yeah, no, sure. So my previous role was not in D&I, it was in marketing. So when I was at a Big Four, I led marketing for an asset management business there. And whilst I enjoyed that job for a couple of years, it did get to a point where I needed an extra challenge, also from kind of what's getting me up in the morning, where's my passion aligning with, what's my passion aligning with. So I was getting more involved in the D&I agenda at the firm side of desk, and I kind of realized I had a lot to offer in this area. But more importantly, through BLM and a lot of the conversations that were happening, I almost kind of wanted a seat at the table, or if not at the table, at least an ear to those who are at the table, right? So that's when I started to think, okay, how can I pivot my career to do a role like that? What transferable skills, which I'm sure we'll come into later, do I have that can lend itself quite well to that type of role? And often, the lived experience on top of that to what's being discussed and decisions that are being made around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that's when I initially kind of had the thought around, let me try to explore that. Kind of networks. I know Shaqeal mentioned networks. It was pivotal in my career, in me kind of trying to figure out, I'm at a Big Four, kind of what's the banking environment like? Who do I know in my network there for me to understand the culture? Yeah, and it was through conversations and then applications, and then, I make it seem so simple, and then kind of landing this job. But I think it really is about, if you feel you're ready to make that change, just have the conversation and explore it, use your networks to do, which is what I did in my career. And yeah, and then through those conversations, I've ended up with a role which almost encompasses part of my marketing experience before, as well as the massive focus on diversity inclusion at the moment. So yeah, I think just about really trying to kind of seize the moment and have those conversations and not sit on it too long.
I love that. I love how you spoke about your passions and really thinking about how you can contribute to, the different roles that you may have been considering at the time, and how your skill sets really aligned in that way. That's great. Great. So my next question, and maybe I'll let Shaqeal take this one, but what were the first steps that you took when you decided to action a career move?
Yeah, so from my point of view, I kind of understood that from the offset within investment banking, it could get quite technical. So I figured I would work on, honing in on my technical skill set, really trying to develop that as much as possible by selecting the right technical rotations, essentially. So that would give me the right exposure, and from then I build up the skill set, the know-how, and effectively get to the point of transferable skills, really. Other than that, I would say trying to do very well within the team you're in, or within the department you're in, because at the end of the day, if you do well, you're going to get more and more opportunity. And again, that allows you to build that skill set, maybe take on some sort of management opportunities, and essentially just help you stand out. So when you do get to the point where you have an interview with a new potential employer, you've made the most out of what you have. You've made the most out of the seat you're in, and then you take that and you leverage that for your new opportunity. And lastly, I would say, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Essentially, what that means is do the preparation before you get to the interview, so you're already in the mindset. So when you get that call, you're ready to go, and it's not going to take you very long to prepare and start from zero, essentially. So at that point, you let your preparation meet the opportunity.
Great, thank you. And I think so much of that resonates with me. And I didn't change industries, but moving from one division to another, I think it was really important for me to have taken as many opportunities in my prior role before moving to my current role, because that gave me the exposure that I needed to the teams and individuals that I was looking to really work with, in the long term. But I think that applies, if you're looking to change companies or industries as well. I think there are opportunities to network and engage with your industry to figure out what skills you can leverage there. And so for me, when I was making, my move, I think, and generally, I think Lauren spoke to this as well, but speaking to people about it, I think is probably one of the most important things you can do, and discussing, for me, it was with my manager at the time, who was extremely supportive of it. And she actually was the one to help me figure out my roadmap, who I need to be connected with, who I need to network with, and to really help me get in the door. And she was a fantastic ear and mentor to lean on. And I would say, make sure that you have individuals in your court, whether it's, you may not want to be, go to your current team or manager, but there will be other individuals, other stakeholders at the firm who hopefully you can reach out to. And within your personal lives and communities, definitely take advantage of the resources that you have for advice. So that would be my.
Just to add to that super quickly, I think it's that point around speaking to people is so key, because I think some of us who are already in the banking industry, we're kind of used to maybe the culture and the norms, the do's and the don'ts, if you will. But I do have to remind myself that those who have never worked in a bank or financial services would often wonder, what is the actual day-to-day like? And if you really be even more specific, for a Black heritage person, what is your experience? So I think I find it really useful, and I'm sure other panelists today, kind of trying to understand the real of the situation is really key to maybe making that decision to move or not.
Absolutely. Morgan Stanley is a 75,000 employee firm. There are so many different teams, so many different functions. The only way you can really get a sense of, what you may want to do in our firm or any others, is really to talk to people. So I think that is absolutely key. Great, thanks. So let's move on. Let's speak a bit about what attracted some of our panelists to financial services and the world of investment banking. Elizabeth, let's hear from you on that one.
Sure. So as I touched on earlier during the introductions, my career path, I was really on a trajectory of being, I think, a more traditional litigation path. I wasn't even a transactional attorney for many years. And I went from the U.S. Attorney's Office in-house to a community development finance institution, a CDFI, and that move really changed my life. I mean, it exposed me to small business lending. It exposed me to the world of grant making and philanthropy. It exposed me to audits, what an audit should look like for a tax-exempt organization. And I was there for 5 years, and that's really how I ended up where I am today. In 2020, I saw that Morgan Stanley had started this program called the Experienced Professionals Program. And I do really believe, had it not been for that program, I would not have made this career change. At first, I wasn't running from the law at all. I liked my life, I liked my job, but I knew that I wanted to learn a bit more. I wanted to dive more into the technical and understand finance from a business seat. And so the MSCPP program and being at Morgan Stanley was going to give me that opportunity. I applied because first I saw that there was a tremendous amount of support at the highest levels of Morgan Stanley for the program. Almost everybody who interviewed me was an executive director or a managing director, so I knew that this was an inaugural program, but it was going to be organized, and there was a lot of support within Morgan Stanley for it. And it was very thoughtful. There was going to be a training period, and then there was a rotation opportunity. And then I knew that if I did well, I would get an offer of full-time employment. And all of that really de-risked the change for me. And so that's why I say I probably would not have made this change, but for the program in late 2020, early 2021. And so it's just been a wonderful opportunity for me to be in a banking seat and working with our HFA clients, our nonprofit clients, and to be able to work with them from the business perspective, but also understanding the law. So
it's a great way to say it, and then to see how your skill sets have really moved you from one team or one sort of industry almost to another. And yeah, that's really fascinating to hear. You spoke about de-risking the whole experience, and I think that's a key element for anyone who's looking to develop their roadmap or their framework for moving. And the sort of the first thing to one of the first things to really consider is how do you calm yourself and make sure that you have a way forward, or you're not too anxious about the steps and what you need to do and how you get there. So that's great. Shaqeal, I know you moved from the Big Four, you said, to Morgan Stanley. So can you talk to us about your experience and what drew you to financial services?
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I guess the interest has always been in broader financial services. When I was young, I just wanted to wear a suit and work in the city, and not much has really changed since then. But now I realize that I enjoy evaluating company strategies and sort of keeping in touch with everything that's happening around the world. From my first role, I kind of learned that I liked the valuation and business modeling aspects the most. And that's sort of what drew me to equity research, the technical nature of the work. But then at the same time, you get some, at the junior level, actually, some really good client exposure. And on top of that, you work with really smart people. Every day on the floor, I'm learning something new. And in research in particular, there's so many different sectors, and there's strategists and there's economists. You could just be walking around the corridor and you're picking up new information all the time. So that sort of angle of self-development, of always learning, of being around the smartest people is what kind of drew me to investment banking.
Good, and I think you touched on one of the skill sets there, and this will be, I think, a theme throughout the whole conversation. But you enjoyed evaluating companies, and that's something that you did at your prior job. It's something that you're doing now, and I think maybe the lens with which you do it or through which you do it might be, or the angle might be slightly different. But ultimately, it's a skill set that you gained from your prior experience that you're able to apply. I would assume hopefully quite smoothly to your current role. So yeah, no, that's great. And I think, that theme of leveraging your skill sets is something that we'll be hearing throughout the conversation. Great. So, well, my next question is really around networks, and how important was your professional network when it came to your career change? Joel, what would you, I guess, have to say for that one?
Yeah, so I probably have to say that pretty much every single job that I got, especially after the software engineering role, I got in some form through my networks. I could be speaking about this for an hour, but I'm just going to focus on how I got into Morgan Stanley. So I had a friend who worked in the Zurich office. He is actually a derivative sales trader. And just by chance, he sat next to a person who was focused on the digital asset space for Morgan Stanley. So he told me to, reach out to that person and made the connection. Ultimately, we hit it off. I mean, we had a lot of common interests, given that we both worked in the same space. And that ultimately at some point sparked a discussion. Hey, do you want to join the firm in any form? Because I would love to work with you. And of course, I was interested. And he then pretty much soon after connected me to someone that he works with very closely and had the headcount. And after a honestly pretty tough interviewing process, I managed to get the job. And ultimately what I learned there was that you really should draw on every single connection that you have and be genuine in your passions and interests. And most of the time things kind of work out by themselves. And I know it can be, really daunting especially for people who might not feel like they have the existing network already. But especially if you already have an idea around what you want to do and you have strong interests, you'd be surprised how quickly you can connect with people from all types of walks of life.
Great, thank you. Shaqeal, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably reiterate what Joel was saying. As soon as I sort of realized I had an interview for this position, sorry, I sort of reached out to my network straight away and, you know, got an idea of what's the role like, who are the key people involved in the hiring decision, you know, what can I expect from the interview, what can I expect from, I guess, you know, work-life balance perspective, all those kind of questions which are normal when you're going for a new role. But, you know, you really need to leverage your network to make sure that you get the best idea of what you're going into and to also prepare yourself in the best way. So yeah, it's really important. And then on top of that, I would say that, you know, once I did get the role, I did actually speak to other people who made a similar move to sort of say, okay, should I accept it? You know, is this a good move strategically? You know, to think longer term rather than just looking at what's in front of you right now. So I did speak to other people who had done the same thing, and they said, yeah, you know, it works out. It's a great move. Did this for me, did that for me, and I said, okay, fine. You know, it sounds like a good idea. And then lastly, I would say, once you are in the position, you know, where someone has helped you, don't forget to put the ladder out for someone else as well. You know, it's probably quite likely that at some point someone will reach out to you and say, hey, I see you're working at X and Y. Could you please help me figure this out? What is it like working there? So, you know, don't ignore those messages. Help people out.
Touched on a really good point there. I think with leveraging your network and speaking to people perhaps who have gone through a similar experience, maybe not the exact experience, but you can use your network for, you know, different parts of your network for different aspects of the process. And I think that's really, really important to remember and to seek out those who you think would be really valuable, have really valuable inputs or thoughts on how you can go about the next step. So thank you for that. Elizabeth, would you like to add anything there?
Sure. I don't want to repeat everything that everyone said. I agree wholeheartedly with that. I think the networking doesn't stop once you get the job and once you arrive. I think it continues. You know, I came in as a VP laterally, and the associates and the analysts and other VPs all around me had, you know, already been here longer than me. Some might be junior to me, but they had been at Morgan Stanley 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, and understood the culture of the department, the culture of the firm. They knew other people, and they've proven to be really valuable. I think that, you know, when you're first generation anything in particular, you know, I'm first generation graduate student, first generation born in this country, and I think probably many people, you know, on this webinar are as well. We're not really taught to network and to reach out to people. It's kind of do your job and keep your head down, and somebody will come along and notice your great work. And so, you know, for me, networking doesn't come naturally. It's something that I've really had to work at. I think that if you're like me, a good thing to do is perhaps to join affinity groups and start going to events. I have also found that, you know, people are really open to going for a coffee. If they can't do 30 minutes, they can do 15 minutes. If they can't go around the corner or across the street, they can go to the cafeteria downstairs here at 1585. And they're more than happy to talk to you for a few minutes about the trajectory of their career at Morgan Stanley or someplace else and how they ended up, you know, where they are. And so, yeah, I think my one piece of advice is that the conversation and the outreach continues, even when you make that career change and you make that move.
I would say I probably had a very similar sentiment, I guess, going into the workplace as you did. And, you know, I think one of the best pieces of advice that someone gave me is that I have to take responsibility for my career. If I want to make a move or make a change, I have to initiate the conversations. I have to be proactive in who I'm seeking out and showing my skill set to. And so, you know, for me, it was definitely very important to have those conversations, to reach out to people. And like you said, most people, hopefully will be very willing to have, if not a 30-minute conversation, a 15-minute coffee or something. And those industry connections or those networks don't have to be limited to your particular company. They can be industry affiliations that you also engage with. And so they're, have a sort of big picture mindset when it comes to how broad your network can really be. Great. So I mentioned we'll probably speak a good bit about transferable skills, and I think my next question is really focused on that. So Lawrence, I'll start with you, but what transferable skills did you notice were useful when you made the move to your current role, and how did you utilize those in your new role?
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, in the move to my current role and in previous roles, one of them has been stakeholder management. I think that is in my day-to-day job now, before even outside of work, I guess. But the ability to manage your stakeholders, your internal stakeholders, your clients, manage expectations, I think that's been so pivotal for me. And sometimes, it can take time if you're new to a new role, new to a new firm. What I would say goes hand in hand with that is the ability to read the room as well. So often, if you are trying to assess the lay of the land, and then how you kind of insert yourself within that, I think is really important. Whether you're at a senior level or kind of an entry level, I think is really key. And me personally, has really helped me navigate certain situations. And I think when I joined Morgan Stanley, for example, the first 3 months for me personally was really trying to kind of read the room, kind of really assess who the key players were in certain divisions or on certain projects. And then that helped me navigate myself around that and build my profile in that type of way. But I must admit, it's not always easy to do that. So I think, it is through conversations sometimes with your peers to understand how kind of that team works or that kind of projects is set up. But I think stakeholder management for me has been really key in setting me up for success. I would always say a common one that comes a lot of the time, organization, but out of that, I really had the prioritization piece, so the ability to prioritize well. So often for me, in my career, on a day-to-day basis now, you may have at times 3 or 4 people who email you for something that's urgent, they all need it now. How do you make that call? How do you make that decision? And often, sometimes you might choose something over another, and that results in maybe one person not getting what they want at that time. But I think how you manage that situation and manage the expectations there, I think is really key. And helps you in your day-to-day kind of how you work in a measured way, and come to work not feeling too overwhelmed at times, because we do have moments, but if you're able to at the start of the day or before you leave work the day before, for me personally, I really try to plan the next day out and where possible the week, and prioritize. I think that stood me in good stead in my roles now, and also before as well. So I think that's been key for me. And then I guess lastly, we've spoken about it before, but I think it's also interpersonal skills, linked to networking a bit, and kind of how you can kind of communicate effectively with people across the whole firm. Often people talk about the elevator pitch. So when you are, in the elevator, or when you are kind of in a meeting and someone passing you by, and you have to make that impression within 30 seconds about what you do, kind of how you're doing it, and basically why you're here. Especially when you're new, I think it's so key to be able to do that. So I think that was another tactic that I've had in my career, and also when I joined Morgan Stanley, to really be clear on what I'm doing, what value I'm bringing, to leave that lasting impression. So I think those are some things that I think as I transitioned from my previous role to here really kind of set me up quite well.
That's great. And I think, finance and so many other industries, it's a people business. And so that stakeholder management is really important. And you can't downplay the interpersonal skills that you have and how that could really help you move, transition between industries or jobs. Definitely make sure that you're aware of what those interpersonal skills that you have are and how you can leverage them in a new role. And thank you for that. Joel, is there anything that you might like to add, or any of our other panelists?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, maybe talk a little bit about my transferable skills. So coming in from consulting firm, I already knew to some degree how to interact with senior members of a firm. So that was very helpful in what I do now, because I do interact with a lot of MD level leaders. And sometimes I also have to give input to board members. And I think also the combination of software engineering and consulting made me just have an easier time in breaking down really complex topics. And it also wasn't, I don't really fear complexity because of it. And that's definitely also been helpful, given that I'm navigating a pretty new space. And I think from a software engineering perspective, the technical acumen also helps me think about how I just organize myself with tools and how to be efficient. It's not really hard for me to get around like an Excel spreadsheet or something like that. So it's definitely been very, 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 very helpful in what I do today.
That's great. Any other thoughts from the panelists before we move on? I think we have a good few questions and I think a few Q&A, so we'll keep it going. Elizabeth, so in terms of skills, how did Morgan Stanley help you develop your skill sets, and what resources, I guess, were in place, and what support did you receive, I guess, through your the program, participation in the program?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we received a tremendous amount of support through the program. I think the fact that it was the inaugural cohort, really, you know, Morgan Stanley wanted to get it right. We wanted to get it right. So we had a 1-month training that sort of ran the gamut in terms of the introduction to finance, as well as sort of going deep into finance. There was a lot of support for series exams. I mean, that was something that I was very anxious about. I know a few people had said to me, you know, you've taken the bar exam. How can you possibly be concerned about a series exam? But, you know, when you come from a completely different industry, you don't know. And we got a lot of, you know, I think one-on-one support from our, you know, what I call our cohort leader, Anne-Marie Lewis, who's just wonderful, not just in the beginning stages, but throughout my cohort. We really supported each other. Many of us were making a career change, but some of us came from different parts of finance. That wasn't an investment bank or finance adjacent. Some had already had the technical background. And so it wasn't as much as a career shift for them. I think they provided a lot of support to me, for example. And, you know, Morgan Stanley provided us with a lot of mentoring, a sponsor, which really helped, again, in terms of the de-risking. And when I was done with my rotation and hit the desk, it was late summer, and I was able to join some of the analyst training that was incredibly helpful, and training that was specific for my seat in my department. And I think that was by design. Again, you know, providing that really thoughtful, organized support for people to make sure that when they landed in their permanent seat, there was more training that was specific to the department.
That's really great to hear. And I think, you know, for so many who are changing roles, they may have missed out on some of the, you know, analyst training sessions that would have happened for someone who's coming up in the industry for the first time. But hearing that, you know, programs and resources are available that provide a structured way to upskill you is really great to hear.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, just very quickly, you know, I think someone had said to me, oh, but you're a vice president. And I said, yeah, but, you know, like I'm very humble. I don't care. And I think when you make a change like this, you have to be, and you just get the knowledge and the training from wherever you can get it. And you know, I didn't mind. I will absolutely sit in a training with analysts. If it makes me sharper, if it makes me a better banker, you know, go ahead and do it.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Let's see, Lawrence, anything you'd like to add there as well?
Yeah, I think that's the only thing, I guess, from a diversity and inclusion perspective and kind of what we're doing as a team. So a lot of our efforts in the EMEA region, we recognize that, you know, there are some of our central training programs that are run by from the kind of central HR team, but also we have a number of targeted programs to certain demographics in the organization, mentoring programs, for example, one that we launched this year, which is focused on a lot of our ethnically diverse officers, and we're looking to roll that out more widely. That's basically we paired in with typically a managing director in the organization, and let that kind of relationship either turn to sponsorship or just helping them build a network, etc. So that's a really good initiative we launched this year, which hopefully will roll out to more people joining the firm in the future and more existing employees. And also another point, we've kind of talked about training available to maybe us or that we've had in our careers, but it's also important to call out the training that may be given to the line managers of those people who are joining the firm and working at the moment as well. And I think we've rolled out a massive program now for all of our people managers and our officers, our kind of vice presidents, exec directors and managing directors as well, to really cover areas like inclusive leadership, inclusive hiring, inclusive performance management, because I think that training piece for your line manager, the layer up, is just as important as what we receive here. So I think that's one thing I've seen in my role since I've joined the firm, is that there's offerings for kind of the wider workforce, and there's also offerings for the line managers, people managers, to ensure that inclusive culture piece is kind of put through the organization in a really authentic way. So that's one thing I've seen, which has been good to see, tackling it from multiple areas.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think it's so important to have both the training and resources provided to you as an individual and helping you succeed, but also those who are responsible for supervising you and guiding you throughout your career. And so having those frameworks and courses in place at the firm is really, really beneficial and sets us all up for success. So that's great. My last question, which Shaqeal, I'll address this one to you. In terms of changing, industry or company, so do you notice a change in the culture upon arriving at Morgan Stanley? And if so, how did you adapt to that, and what support did you receive with acclimatizing?
Yeah, good question. So I think one thing I noticed, particularly in research, is sort of this focus on collaboration. Morgan Stanley sort of prides itself on being global. You're really joining a global investment bank. And in research in particular, the focus is really on collaborating with our global colleagues to produce global insights. So I think that sort of attitude of working together towards a common goal is definitely something which I noticed. Besides this, I would say, at the end of the day, it's still an investment bank. And I think if you're in a front office sort of role, there is pressure. But me personally, I found that, I'm the kind of person who sort of thrives under those sort of situations, those sort of scenarios. And I think for a lot of people that do end up in investment banking, they're probably inclined the same. They want to be in those situations where, everything needs to be completely right and on point. Further, I'd say I've noticed there's a lot of focus on diversity and inclusion. So, compared to the first place I was working at, I've seen loads of initiatives. I mean, Black History Month, there's a lot of focus on that. We have the ACBA, which is the African Caribbean Business Alliance. So, there's a lot of focus on it, and it comes sort of from the top down. It definitely matters to the people who run the ship. And I think me personally, I've been involved in a lot of initiatives, and it feels like I'm involved in more things than there were even available at my last place. So, definitely a big change. And also, it's one of the firm's key values. So at the end of the day, there's only 5 values, and diversity and inclusion is one of them. So yeah, very important.
Yeah, I'd say we definitely take our core values very seriously. We live and breathe them day in and day out. So, I'd definitely echo everything you just said. Lawrence, is there anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add really is that from what I've seen, being in a lot of these meetings where the leadership are discussing diversity and inclusion at firm-wide level, also at divisional level, is there's definitely authenticity there. And I think the authentic piece is so key. And I appreciate, if you are not behind the HR door, you often may question that. But I think that's one thing from culture, from Morgan Stanley's perspective, I've seen leadership, firm-wide, divisionally. They understand the importance of it. As Shaqeal said, it's our fifth core value. So that in itself, it sends a strong message to our leadership and our wider employee workforce. And then also the culture piece through the vast networks that we have here. So I think when you even break it down to the different networks we have in Budapest and in Glasgow and in London and Frankfurt, all over the region, there's so many opportunities for our employees to really lead and help drive the change, and it kind of galvanize the workforce through activities, etc. And I think that culture piece, yes, as a D&I team at Morgan Stanley, often, we have programs, initiatives, but more often than not, it comes from our employees through what they're doing in the networks. And that will then travel kind of onwards, right? So I think that's probably a big shift that I've seen as well, just the vast number of networks we have here, and also the buy-in from leadership too. So that's a positive thing from a culture standpoint at Morgan Stanley.
It's great, and it's definitely good to hear the HR sort of perspective as well. So thank you. So those are all of the questions that we had prepared. I think there are a few questions that we have from the attendees, and the first one, maybe Joel, I'll ask you to take this one. The question is, in light of the tech layoffs, if your skill set is primarily tech focused, would now be a good time to make a career pivot?
So there is a lot of layoffs happening within the tech industry as a whole, especially growth companies. But I don't think necessarily that is, something that Morgan Stanley has an issue with. So if you're interested in working in technology for Morgan Stanley, I'm sure you'd find a lot of open doors. But if you do, if you are interested in making a career change because you're interested in new topics, then definitely, I don't think there's ever the wrong time to consider it. That's ultimately how I would answer that.
Great, thank you. Perhaps this one is for, let's see, what did the recruitment process look like for an experienced professional? Maybe I'll ask both Elizabeth and Shaqeal to address those. Elizabeth, if we could start with you.
Sure. I'm not sure if it's changed since I started over the last 2 years, but there was an application process. I submitted the application when the call went out, and I had probably 2 rounds of interviews. I think all with managing directors. I think 3 or 4 individuals each round. And I think, it's, if you're going to make a career pivot, whether you interview at Morgan Stanley or anywhere else, I think it's very important to make sure that you are honest with yourself and clear with yourself about why you want to change industries or change the organization, because you will be asked that question. So make sure that you have an answer ready. And I think it's also important to ask honestly the questions you need answered, so that you are satisfied within yourself that you're making the right decision. And I think maybe that's just important, career change advice all the time, whether you're making a career pivot or not. But I saw it as an opportunity to be honest and somewhat pointed in my questions as to how, because it was a pilot program, how this was going to, play out, what kind of support would be in place, why they would want somebody like me with my background to go into finance. Whether they saw, given their experience and all their years in banking and all their years at Morgan Stanley, they thought that I could succeed, and why. And I think that honesty is important. And I found that during the interview process, the folks at Morgan Stanley were, they were honest. And I think that they admired that I asked those questions, and they knew that I had been thoughtful about this change.
Great, thank you. Shaqeal, is there anything you may want to add to that? For your
I guess. Oh, yeah, I'm good. Yeah. I think from my point of view, so from the offset, I didn't really actually apply for the role. So I think to start with, I'd say keep going to networking events, because I did one just like this, and someone added me to some sort of system. And from there, you know, they reached out to me and said, hey, we've had a look at your CV. We think you would be suitable for this role. Don't you want to apply? And I said, okay, yes, sounds very good indeed. So I think start off that way, you know, by always saying yes to things and going and checking it out. And then with regards to the interview process, it started off with a screening call. So just walk me through your CV, get an understanding of, you know, your background and what have you been working on and what is your skill set. After that, I believe it was a sort of test, so numerical test, written test. That's obviously quite particular to research. Within other departments, it could be quite different. And then afterwards, there were, I believe, maybe 3 or 4 interviews, one with the team I was joining, and a few more with sort of colleagues across the floor, and also one with our risk manager. So yeah, I think the process is probably different across the department, but definitely be prepared, you know, to go through a few rounds. And I think it's probably quite a similar process for the MSEPP program. I think probably without the test, that, you know, in the application, you sort of signal what you want to do, which divisions you might be interested in, and then they put you in front of the right people to interview with. And, you know, if it's anything like the way they ran the program last year, you know, if you're not entirely sure what division you want to go for, you know, there are, I believe, opportunities to sort of speak to multiple teams and figure out exactly what you want to do and where you would be suited best. Yeah, and then at the end, you probably speak to the head of the department, which in my case is Juliet, and she just says congratulations and welcome. So I think that's pretty much how the process was for me. That was 2 years ago. I'm not sure how much has changed and how much it will change for the MSCPP program. But yeah, that's it from my point of view.
That's great, thanks. And in terms of the London program and where we'll be offering it, I think the Institutional Securities Group and Investment Management will both be participating in the program. So definitely, you know, reach out to the team, and there'll be more information coming on that. I'll ask one more question, and I think that this is a really important one, and I'll open it up to who may want to answer it. But when trying to move to another industry or in another company, if you're up against, you know, people who already have the experience in that same industry, what advice would you give to someone to really stand out throughout the process?
Oh, is that for me?
Oh, for any of the panelists,
Sorry.
feel free to go ahead.
Elizabeth, please go ahead.
Sure. You know, I think it's important to always highlight what your strengths are and what your skill set is, and to focus on that, because you know, a savvy interviewer, somebody who's interviewed many people, will just, you know, they'll kind of look at your resume and assess what your skill set might be. So I think you have to be honest about that, about what you bring to the table, and also focus on why it is you want to change industries or be at a different bank or be at a different company, what you're hoping to get from the experience, what you can bring to it. And you know, you are inherently going to be competing with people who may already have some of those skill sets. But you know, if you're being interviewed for a reason. So half the battle is over. I think ultimately people always want to work with people who have strong work ethic, who are good team members, the kind of folks you want to be in the foxhole with, folks who don't have really sharp elbows but lift others up. And you know, that's going to be a strength anywhere. And you know, figure out, I guess, ways in which you can build up a particular skill set independent of that job or that place. So whether it's, you know, taking some sort of auditing, maybe certain classes, doing online webinars, something that shows that you have a genuine interest in that industry you're trying to get into, and then don't be afraid to talk about it. because it lets the interviewer and the organization know how serious you are about it. And I think people, the right place for you will admire that, and will think that that's a good thing.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to the panelists. I think this has been a fantastic session. I know that we're almost at time. Maybe if I can get 10 seconds from each of you on what's the one piece of advice you would give to those participating or looking to transition careers, what would you say? Shaq, and maybe I'll start with you.
I think, just try to get involved as much as possible in terms of networking events. Stay ready so you don't have to get ready, and don't be afraid to shoot your shot, so to say. Don't have any doubts. If you're qualified and if you're a smart person, you're intelligent, you're driven, you're hardworking, you don't need to have the financial services background. There will be people who are engineers, people who are lawyers, people who are doctors. There's a few doctors on my floor, actually. So definitely look out for the event as well that we have coming up on the 15th of February. It's just an inside event for the MSEPP program, where there might be a few hints and tips with regard to the application process. And yeah, I think the key takeaway from my point of view is just get involved and believe in yourself.
Great, thank you. Joel, 10 seconds or less, you're up.
I'll try my best. So one thing is kind of ignore the imposter syndrome. I personally kind of struggle with that coming into corporate world. I didn't really have any family members who were exposed to the banking industry. Also was really strange to me, but I felt like throughout the process now, I realized, as Shaq also mentioned, if you can deal with complexity, if you're smart driven, and you have the right soft and hard skills, you can learn it on the job.
Lawrence, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think Liv said it. I agree. Shoot your shot. I think if you're feeling time is now to try something new, just network and just make a go of it. Yeah, so just time is of the essence, and try now before it's too late.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
At 10 seconds or less. I mean, I echo what everybody has said. I think that someone had said earlier, Morgan Stanley is a place that has 75,000 employees. There's something for almost everybody who, works hard. And I know that for me, project management and client management have been my strengths because of my background. So don't think that because you don't come from a hard technical background that it's a skill you can't develop later in life and that there isn't value for you someplace, like a bank.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much, the panelists. Thank you to everyone who's joined in today. I hope that you really resonated. I hope the conversation resonated with your career aspirations and provided some insights into how you can help move and make the next step. Hopefully, please do keep Morgan Stanley in your thoughts, if you're looking for new roles or future job searches. And in the spirit of networking and staying connected, do follow Morgan Stanley on LinkedIn for the latest insights, news, and career opportunities. And as I mentioned before, our HR team will be sending you all an email with details on how to join the Morgan Stanley Talent Network, which will keep you informed about the different career opportunities and future events. And as Shaq mentioned, we do have the event on the 15th of February that will provide more information about the Experienced Professionals program and the career opportunities that we have there. So thank you so much to everyone who's participated. If you do have any questions or if you didn't get to your questions, there will be a follow-up from our HR team. So don't worry, we will get to answer those as well. But thank you so much. And thank you to the BYP Network for providing us with a platform to meet you all this evening.